In the world of construction machinery, if you are talking about the Evergreen survivor of the 20-ton excavator class, there is one name you simply can't get around, and that is Kobelco's SK200. People on site usually just call it the Kobelco 200. Even if you've never touched an excavator in your life, if you've ever spotted that signature clean, light blue out on the roadside, or once in a great while, that rare and striking bright green, then 9 times out of 10 you are looking at a Kobelco. From the moment the very first SK200 rolled out of the factory gate in the early 1980s, right up to today, it has been slogging through the mud and the rubble all over the world for more than 40 years. So today let's talk the whole thing through, from start to finish. The long backstory of this legendary family across the decades, the trivia behind it, the nicknames it picked up on the job site, and all those little secrets that operators love and hate in equal measure. Let's start with its pedigree, which is actually a lot tougher than most people assume. Kobelco's full name is Kobe Steel, a Japanese outfit that got its start back in 1905, and as early as 1930 it built Japan's first electric mining shovel. Its real first step into the hydraulic excavator era came in 1967, when it brought out the H208, the first crawler hydraulic excavator built entirely on its own technology. In that era, the whole industry was still feeling its way forward, but Kobelco had already locked its attention onto speed and reliability early on. That same drive later flowed straight into the bones of the SK200. To really understand the Kobelco 200, you've got to untangle its sprawling family tree first. Across these 40-some years, it has gone through 10 generations of model changes, and almost every major shift landed right on the rhythm of the global construction equipment market rising and falling. The first generation SK200 from the early 1980s, fresh out of the gate, along with its long undercarriage, sibling the SK200 LC, both look a little green by today's standards. The machines of that era radiated a kind of raw mechanical beauty, ran on mechanical gauges, and had no electronic controls whatsoever. The engine was mostly Mitsubishi power, and the whole machine weighed somewhere around 19 tons. Those two letters, LC, simply mean long crawler, which made it especially suited to mining and heavy load work. This generation has basically all gone to museums or the scrapyard by now, but it left the first footprint in the SA200's history. Operators from the early days recall that the SK200 back then dug into soil like it was slicing tofu. The hydraulics responding so fast it was crisp and clean, never sluggish, never dragging its feet. Right after came the second generation in the mid-1980s, the Mark II, which upgraded the hydraulic system, sped the movements up another notch, and made the cab a bit more comfortable, though it was rarely seen outside Japan. What really made Kobelco explode in popularity was the third generation. Born in 1988, the one old operators still talk about with such fondness, the Super 3. This machine essentially set in stone the genes that Kobelco carries to this day. Big hydraulic flow and blazing fast movement. In an age that generally prized steadiness and slow, careful work, the Super 3 used its dizzying speed to teach every competitor a solid lesson. Plenty of veteran operators recall that running a Super 3 felt like the hydraulics had a soul of their own, the man and the machine working in perfect sync. Then, in the early 1990s, the fourth generation, the Super 4, arrived, introducing an electronic monitoring system for the first time and refining the hydraulic circuit along the way. The movements were just as fast, but the failure rate dropped, and it became easier to service. Quite a few operators who are bosses themselves now will tell you the very first Kobelco they ever got their hands on was this Super 4. But the one that pushed the old-school Kobelco to its absolute peak was the fifth generation, launched in 1994 and known as the Super 5. On the used market, this machine is practically revered as a legendary unit, and even today there are people willing to pay top dollar to collect one. Why is it so revered? Precisely because its pure mechanical structure was so uncomplicated. The engine of that era had no complex electronics, yet the tuning of the hydraulic pump had reached a level of sheer artistry. On the job site, its digging efficiency was frighteningly high, and it was from right around that time that the phrase, "fast as a Kobelco," spread through the trade for good. On top of that, it was wonderfully easy to fix. One wrench and a couple of screwdrivers, and the mechanic down at the end of the village could have it roaring back to life. Over the same 8-hour shift, the Super 5 could often load several more truckloads of dirt than its rivals. Fast, fluid in its movements, and easy on the hands. Here's the funny part. A lot of drivers, after learning to run an excavator, would find Kobelco a bit jarring the first time because its response was so quick that the slightest nudge of the joystick sent the machine lunging forward. But once they got used to it, going back to those slow plodding machines felt sluggish no matter how they looked at it. That is probably a big reason Kobelco built up such a large base of die-hard fans. As the new millennium rolled around, Kobelco moved fully into the Astra era, and the naming switched from the old mark system over to a number system. The sixth generation, the Dash 5, launched in 1998, took the key step into electronics. But precisely because the level of electronics jumped up all at once, that early circuit system didn't adapt too well to the somewhat harsh job site conditions in some regions, and it gave more than a few service techs real headaches. By the Dash 6 in 2001, Kobelco had learned its lesson, and the coordination of the movements clearly improved while fuel consumption was pushed down. The one that truly earned legendary status all over again was the 6E, released around 2004. This generation swapped in an Isuzu engine, and the electronic control system finally matured fully. It became one of the most numerous Kobelcos on the global used market, and a milestone that fans widely consider the lowest in failure rate. Plenty of people in the trade feel the 6E is the best balanced generation Kobelco ever made for reliability. It held onto that old-school Kobelco high-speed punch while gaining a mature, stable set of electronics. Low failure rate, plenty of parts around, and a deep well of repair experience. That is why even today there are still plenty of crews running the 6E as their main workhorse. Then, in 2007, Kobelco entered its golden decade in the global market with the launch of the classic Dash 8. This generation rode on an all-new platform, carried a Hino engine, and came fitted with a remote monitoring system, striking just the right balance between fuel economy and speed. For a lot of owners, the first time they ever encountered remote management, being able to see the machine's location, fuel use, and running status on a screen, was with the Dash 8. That sounds utterly ordinary today. But more than a decade ago, it was genuinely ahead of its time. Those were the years when the world was caught up in a frenzy of building railways, highways, and real estate, and across booming markets, contractors and mine owners were practically lining up to grab a Dash 8. Many an owner has done the math. Within its class, the Dash 8's fuel economy held at an excellent level for the long haul. And a machine saving just a few liters a day adds up to a strikingly large number over a year. So when the trade sizes it up, they tend to toss out one line. This is the Kobelco that makes you the most money. Even today in a lot of sand and stone yards, you can still spot a battered, weathered Dash 8 tirelessly swinging its bucket. The Dash 9 that came afterward was something of a transitional model, and then in 2016 Kobelco officially ushered everyone into the Generation 10. Today's Dash 10 has a cab as plush as a sedan, with low vibration and low noise. And thanks to Hino's latest electronic control system, fuel consumption has dropped yet again compared to its forebears. The official figures say that versus the previous generation, it saves 16% in H mode, 14% in S mode, and as much as 19% in Eco mode. The engine is the Hino J05 series, putting out somewhere around 114 to 118 kilowatts. Running this generation, you really do start to feel like digging has turned into something you can enjoy. Beyond these standard versions, Kobelco also spun off a whole squad of specialists. There is the long undercarriage version, with crawlers stretched out specifically so it can stand more steadily on mines and soft ground. There is the narrow undercarriage version, with the crawlers pulled in tight so it can thread through those cramped European alleys. There's the short tail version, whose rear barely sticks out past the tracks, so it'll never scrape a wall doing urban street work. And there are even the demolition machines and long-reach versions with their extra long arms, built for tearing down and crushing buildings or for dredging and port work. Put together, they hold up this whole sprawling Kobelco 200 family. In a sense, the SK200 long ago stopped being a single model and became an entire product family. Now that we've covered the family background, let's talk about how it earned its standing in this business. It really comes down to one idea. In all the martial arts under heaven, only speed is unbeatable. On a job site, time is money. To fill the same dump truck, another brand might take 5 minutes, but Kobelco, with its clever hydraulic flow merging and oversized flow distribution, might get it done in under 4. That kind of efficiency in earth-moving work is practically like cheating. Beyond speed, it is also fuel efficient, especially after the Dash 8 and Dash 10, where Kobelco poured real effort into electronic fuel savings. Plenty of owners have run the numbers and found that the fuel saved over a year can cover more than half an operator's wages. Add to that the maturity of the Hino and Isuzu engines, paired with Kobelco's own silky hydraulics, and the control feels as natural as reaching out with your own arm. The operator isn't worn out, so the work naturally goes faster. That said, there is no such thing as a perfect machine, even as the Kobelco 200 gives you that extreme speed. It carries a few chronic quirks that give owners headaches. Its most famous label is Tofu Kobelco, and some people flat out call it the delicate beauty, because Kobelco's whole identity is the earth-moving prince. What it chases is lightweight and high speed. If you insist on taking it into a high-intensity hard rock mine and have it go toe-to-toe with stone day after day, after the blasting's done, its boom and arm often just can't take it. In the trade, a cracked or split boom on a Kobelco is hardly news. As the old operators put it, a Kobelco is something to be cherished, not something to be thrashed. The other thing that gives owners headaches is its temperament. Kobelco's hydraulic and electrical systems are both extremely sensitive, especially on the Dash 6 and Dash 8, which are as fussy about their diesel and hydraulic oil as a pampered young lady. If you cut corners and pour in the cheap, back-alley diesel from some little fuel truck, or you are too lazy to change the hydraulic oil filter for ages, it'll give you attitude on the spot. Clogged injectors, the computer board throwing alarms, movements locking up dead. It is not like some American or domestic old-timers that are rough and tough, that'll soldier on even if the fuel's a little off or there is a bit too much water. A Kobelco, the moment it feels even slightly unwell, just downs tools and quits on you. But these delicate little ailments do nothing to dent how popular it is in the market. In today's new machine market, even though it has taken a fierce hit from the rise of low-cost domestic brands in many emerging markets, the Kobelco 200, riding on the rock-solid reputation it has built up across Southeast Asia, Europe, and other strongholds, still holds firmly onto a core share among the foreign brands. And on the used market, the Kobelco 200 is downright hard currency. Walk through any of the second-hand machinery markets around the world, and you'll find the Kobelco stalls forever packed with people. There is a rather interesting food chain here. Standing at the peak of collectability and nostalgia is the Super 5, and as long as one's in good shape, there is always a veteran owner willing to pay a premium to bring it home and anchor the fleet. But the ones that truly reign in sheer circulation volume are the 6E and the Dash 8. The Dash 8 especially has an astonishingly high share of the used market, and its resale value is remarkably strong. A Dash 8 that has logged over 10,000 hours, as long as the engine's never had a major overhaul and the hydraulic pump hasn't blown apart, can be snapped up within days of being listed. For people buying used, the whole appeal of the Kobelco 200 is that you can buy it and put it straight to work in the dirt. And when you flip it later, you lose very little. User opinions on it carry an interesting kind of split, too. The heartfelt take from most operators is that once you've run a Kobelco, every other machine feels sluggish. That silky responsiveness, where the machine snaps back the instant you push the joystick, is addictive. The boss's verdict is more hard-nosed. As long as you have it dig dirt nicely and feed it good fuel faithfully, it is a moneymaker through and through, but rent it out to someone who doesn't know what they're doing and have them go gnawing at rock, and you can just wait to weld the boom back together when it comes home. For exactly that reason, the three most representative generations in operators' eyes are really the Super 5, the 6E, and the Dash 8. And as it happens, those three generations witnessed almost the entire arc of the global construction market, from the age of imported machines all the way to the era of low-cost domestic competition. When it comes to upkeep and after sales, the gap between Kobelco 200 generations is honestly a great chasm. From the Generation 10 onward, its smart maintenance is done remarkably well. The machine's built-in remote management system is like a personal physician, and when the engine oil's due for a change, or there is grit in the hydraulic oil, it'll push a notice straight to the owner's phone app. The engine bay design has grown more and more user-friendly, too, with the diesel filter and oil filter all clustered in spots you can reach with an outstretched hand, so you can finish the daily servicing standing right on the ground, without having to clamber up and down covered in mud like in the old days. And Kobelco has one colossal advantage. Its sheer numbers out there are so vast that whether it is original parts, aftermarket parts, or salvaged parts, the market's flush with them. And plenty of mechanics can name the common fault locations with their eyes closed. For an owner, that means genuinely lower repair costs. But its after-sales does often draw grumbling from individual owners. The trouble is that original parts run a bit pricey, and the electronic control system's fault codes are awfully complex. Once the computer board throws an alarm without a professional diagnostic computer and a Kobelco service engineer, the average person can't even figure out what that string of codes means. And so the market has spawned a rather peculiar phenomenon. folk Kobelco masters everywhere. These masters don't rely on anything fancy. They rely on one masterful skill, the art of converting to pure mechanical, turning the fussy electronic controls into old-style mechanical cable linkages, and swapping the complicated hydraulic solenoid valves for purely manual adjustment. After the conversion, sure, it is not as fuel efficient or as precise as before, but the machine turns rugged and hard-wearing, which makes it a favorite of many owners out in remote mountain regions and logging camps. As for the trivia surrounding the Kobelco 200 out on the job sites, well, there is no end to it. In a lot of places, the older generation doesn't call it Kobelco at all. They call it Komatsu's cousin, or simply Kobe Steel, because its parent company is none other than the famous Japanese firm Kobe Steel. In the early days, when information didn't travel far, a lot of workers thought excavators only came from Komatsu and Caterpillar. So when they saw Kobelco's distinctive clean, light blue, they took to privately calling it the Blue Komatsu. And as that nickname got passed around, it really did lead more than a few outsiders to assume it was some secret line under the Komatsu umbrella. There is also a classic anecdote about color. Everyone knows Kobelco is blue-green, but one year, to celebrate some milestone, Kobelco rolled out a limited run of specially painted machines in certain regions, and there was even a bright yellow special edition. As the story goes, the very first day that yellow Kobelco 200 drove onto a site, it clashed outfits with the Seine and the cat parked beside it. The site loudspeaker boomed, "That yellow machine, move it over," and 3 machines of 3 different brands all cut their engines and poked their heads out at once, the operators staring at one another in confusion. After that, the boss who'd bought the limited edition learned his lesson the hard way, bought a few buckets of paint himself, and repainted the machine back to that signature Kobelco blue overnight. As he put it, what you want from a Kobelco is that look that is recognizable at a single glance. Paint it yellow, and you've lost the very soul of digging. There is also a famous faux Kobelco oil test making the rounds. Because the Dash 8 is so extraordinarily sensitive to diesel, back in the day a lot of Kobelco operators, when the fuel truck came around to refuel on site, wouldn't look at the gauge at all. Instead, they'd grab a clear water bottle and catch half a bottle, then hold it up to the sun. If the fuel looked even faintly dark or had bits in it, the operator would shut the cab door right then, wave his hand, and say, "My machine can't stomach this oil. Go give it to that iron lump next door. It isn't a picky eater." It is a joke, of course, but it goes to show the special. High maintenance, standing Kobelco holds in operators' hearts. Worth mentioning is another interesting thing among veteran operators. Ask them which generation of Kobelco they love best, and the answer often isn't the newest model. Plenty will say the Super 5 right off the bat, and quite a few will pick the 6E. That illustrates a rather plain truth. The value of construction machinery is never measured by how advanced the technology is alone. Reliable, easy to fix, and durable matter every bit as much. If you really want a buying tip, it goes roughly like this. For mining and heavy loads, pick the long undercarriage LC version, or a Dash 8 or Dash 10. For urban work where you are afraid of clipping a wall when you swing around, go for the short tail SR version. And if you are on a tight budget but want peace of mind, just pick a Super 5 or a 6E in good condition and you can't go wrong. 40-some years on a person that is well into middle age, but for a model like the SK200, it is still out there working on the front lines of countless job sites. From that purely mechanical Super 3 of the old days to today's Dash 10, that is covered in sensors and can be controlled with ease from inside an air-conditioned cab. It has witnessed the infrastructure boom that built whole nations from nothing, and it has kept 2 full generations of construction folk company through their youth. It may not be the most rugged nor the most powerful, but once you've felt that swing speed of its, like your own fingertips reaching out, you'll pretty much understand why, in the hearts of several generations of operators, that touch of Kobelco blue has always been a legend that won't fade.